Long before the world learned the names of saints or demons, there was a whisper carried on the dry winds of the ancient deserts, a name that did not belong to men, yet clung to their memory like smoke: Azazel. It is a name that feels heavy even before you know its story, a name that vibrates with the weight of rebellion, of forbidden knowledge, of choices made in the twilight between obedience and desire. In every tradition where his shadow appears, Azazel is never introduced gently. He arrives like a fracture in the divine order, a teacher, a transgressor, and a reminder that the boundary between enlightenment and destruction is razor thin. Some call him the corrupter of humanity. Others call him the first angel to look at mankind and see potential worth risking heaven for. But all agree on one thing: his arrival changed the destiny of the human world forever. He was not just another watcher. He was the spark, the one whose teachings lit a fire that neither heaven nor earth could easily contain. The story you're about to enter is ancient, older than scripture, older than myth. It is the tale of an angel who stepped out of the chorus of perfection and walked willingly into the imperfections of human life, bringing with him knowledge that was meant to remain sealed in celestial vaults. And that is why his name still lingers, not in temples, but in shadows, not in hymns, but in echoes. Azazel stands at the crossroads of glory and downfall, of liberation and ruin, a being whose choices forced heaven itself to intervene. This is the beginning of his story, the moment when rebellion first took the shape of a teacher. It begins on a mountain whose name still stirs unease in the soul: Hermon, the place where heaven once touched earth and where earth dared to touch back. Long before the flood, long before kingdoms rose and fell, a council of 200 celestial beings looked down upon the world with a mix of fascination and yearning. They were the Watchers, angels assigned to observe humanity, not to influence it, to watch, not to touch, to guide silently, never directly. But watching became longing, longing became hunger, and hunger in the heavens is a dangerous thing. Among these 200, one stood apart, not by rank, but by presence, by the intensity that seemed to radiate from his very being: Azazel. While the others debated and doubted, Azazel carried a restless spark inside him. His gaze lingered too long on the world below, on the fires humans struggled to kindle, on the weapons they tried to forge with bare hands, on the way they stumbled through survival with no tools worthy of their potential. He saw what they could become. He saw what they lacked. And he saw what knowledge could do to a creature hungry for evolution. When the Watchers made their pact, a binding oath sealed in fear and desire, Azazel did not hesitate. Some descended because they lusted. Some descended because they envied. But Azazel descended because he believed humanity could ascend. But intentions, even noble ones, can twist. Their descent was not a gentle glide from heaven. It was a rebellion carved in light and fire, an act that split the ancient sky. The moment their feet touched Mount Hermon, the world shifted. A boundary broke. The divine hierarchy trembled. Azazel stepped onto the earth with purpose. He did not come merely to witness mankind's struggle. He came to change it. From that single, forbidden moment, the world would never be the same. When Azazel walked among humans, he did not come with sermons or celestial warnings. He came with hands full of secrets, knowledge buried deep within the vaults of heaven, knowledge humans were never meant to touch until their spirits were strong enough to wield it. But Azazel looked at humanity and saw more than fragile creatures fumbling in the dark. He saw latent creators, architects, beings who could shape the world if given the tools, and so he began to unveil the forbidden arts. The first gift was metal, not the crude ore humans scratch from the earth, but the alchemy of shaping it, heating, folding, refining. Under Azazel's guidance, humans learned to draw strength from stone and flame. Weapons emerged, blades that gleamed like mirrors of the sun, spears that could bring down beasts with precision, shields that turned men into warriors. To heaven, this was the first fracture. A world that had been innocent now held instruments of power and of bloodshed. The second gift was beauty. Azazel taught women the art of adornment, the powders that could alter a face, the pigments that mimicked starlight, the kohl that gave eyes a depth that stirred desire and envy. He revealed how appearance could influence fate, bending emotions, wills, and hearts. It wasn't vanity alone he awakened, it was self-awareness, dangerous, intoxicating self-awareness. The third gift was sorcery. Azazel showed men and women how to read the earth's hidden veins, how to work with roots and herbs that could heal or poison, knowledge that could restore the sick, but also manipulate life itself. This was no small trespass. He was unlocking layers of reality humanity was not spiritually prepared to navigate. Each lesson carried light, but cast a shadow just as long. Every skill that could elevate a civilization also carried the potential to destroy one. And Azazel, with all his brilliance, either did not see the coming imbalance or chose not to. To the humans he taught, he became a mentor, a visionary, a revealer of cosmic riddles. To the heavens, he became the architect of corruption. And once the teachings took root, the world began to change, faster, darker, and far beyond what any angel had foreseen. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It began like a quiet tremor beneath the surface of the world, subtle, almost beautiful, before erupting into a force that reshaped humanity from the inside out. Once Azazel's teachings spread, something awakened in the human spirit. A spark that had been dormant suddenly flared with intensity. Humans who once lived simply, guided only by instinct and the rhythms of nature, now carried the fire of knowledge in their hands. And with that fire came choice. Choice is the seed of rebellion. Villages that had lived in harmony now discovered strength measured in steel. The first warriors emerged, wielding weapons born of secrets that were never meant for mortal hands. Conflicts once settled by endurance or negotiation were now decided by sharp edges and the quickness of anger. This was the moment innocence began to fade. And yet, it wasn't only violence that changed the world. It was consciousness itself. Adornments turned into symbols of status. Beauty became a form of currency. People who once saw themselves as part of the land began to see themselves above it. Desire grew teeth. Envy found its first throne. Humanity stepped out of its childhood, not through divine evolution, but through the sudden surge of power Azazel had released.
They became creators of tools, masters of metals, manipulators of appearance and emotion. They learned how to shape the world instead of simply enduring it. But with every step they took upward, something in their spirit bent downward. Violence multiplied. Greed rooted itself. The energies of the world, subtle, delicate, once in perfect balance, began to distort under the pressure of newfound ambitions. Even the earth itself trembled under the weight of what it had never been meant to hold so soon. This was the first spiritual rebellion, not against heaven, but against humanity's own nature. A rebellion sparked not by hatred, but by knowledge. Azazel had opened a door that could not be closed, a doorway leading to a destiny neither heaven nor earth had prepared for. And as the world tilted into chaos, the cries of humankind, cries born from wounds, from fear, from the unraveling of innocence, began to rise toward the heavens, cries that would soon demand an answer.
The world below had become unrecognizable. What began as scattered disturbances grew into a storm of corruption that neither angels nor humans could ignore. The Watcher's teachings, Azazel's most of all, had taken root in ways that spiraled beyond intention. Villages turned into battlegrounds. Blood stained the soil in places where peace had once been the only law. And towering above it all were the Nephilim, the giant offspring of angels and humans, beings whose very existence broke the rhythm of creation. These giants grew unchecked, consuming resources, energies, and hopes alike. They dominated the land, brutal and magnificent, forces of chaos born from a union that heaven had never sanctioned. The cries of humanity, terrified, grieving, pleading, rose like smoke from a burning world, and heaven heard them. The archangels, guardians of divine balance, gathered to confront the unfolding crisis. Michael, the warrior; Gabriel, the messenger; Uriel, the keeper of truth; Raphael, the healer. Each one saw the world suffering through a different lens, but all saw the same core wound, the distortion of destiny. Human beings were never meant to wield that kind of knowledge before their souls were fortified enough to handle it. And the Watcher's descent, once a whispered rebellion, had become a cosmic fracture. Azazel stood at the center of it all. The archangels did not act out of rage, they acted out of necessity, to restore order, to protect the vulnerable, to prevent the unraveling of creation itself. Judgment was no longer avoidable. A decree went forth. The Watchers would be punished. Their children would be wiped from the earth, and Azazel, the one held most responsible, would face a sentence unlike any other. Heaven's patience had reached its breaking point. A divine intervention was coming, not as a gentle correction, but as a storm that would sweep across the earth and drown the consequences of the Watcher's rebellion. And at the center of this gathering storm stood Azazel, the angel who had dared to accelerate human evolution and who now would face the weight of celestial justice. When heaven finally moved, it did not descend with thunderous wrath. It descended with precision, the kind that only a divine order can wield. Among the archangels, it was Raphael who received the command concerning Azazel. Not Michael, the warrior, not Gabriel, the herald, Not Uriel, the illuminator, but Raphael, the angel of healing. Because Azazel's punishment wasn't meant to be a spectacle of destruction. It was meant to be a cure for a sickness that had infected the world. Raphael came down not with fury, but with finality. His presence alone shifted the air, the same way the surface of a lake changes when a stone is dropped into its center. And when he found Azazel, there was no clash of swords, no cosmic battle. It was simply the moment when consequences caught up with the one who had unleashed too much too soon. Azazel was bound, hand and foot, with restraints not made of metal, but of light. They pulsed with a divine radiance that no mortal eye could withstand, a binding that neutralized the very essence of rebellion within him. Raphael dragged him to a place unlike any other on earth, the wilderness of Dudael. Dudael was not merely a desert. It was a realm of spiritual exile, a zone of burning sands, jagged stones, and raging winds where heaven and earth never fully touched. A place meant for purification, not comfort. The kind of place where a being of light would feel the sting of existence in every breath. There, Azazel was cast into a pit, a deep, dark chasm, sealed to ensure that his influence would no longer seep into the world above. Over him, mountains of rough rock were piled until even the memory of his presence felt buried. But heaven wasn't finished. A decree was spoken over him. Let all sin be ascribed to Azazel. A symbolic act, one that echoed later in human rituals. This is where the roots of the scapegoat tradition emerged, where a goat bearing the sins of the community would be driven into the wilderness for Azazel. This wasn't demon worship. It was a remembrance, a recognition of the being whose fall intertwined with humanity's own. To the ancient Israelites, to mystics, to esotericists, Azazel became not just a fallen angel, but a spiritual archetype of transgression, burden, and exile. Still, even sealed beneath the world, his influence didn't evaporate. Knowledge doesn't disappear once given. It lingers. It evolves. It finds new vessels. Azazel's judgment ended his freedom, but not the ripple he had already sent through the human story.
Azazel's body was sealed beneath the earth, but his legacy did not stay buried. Knowledge, once released, behaves like wildfire. It moves on its own. It reshapes everything it touches. And the teachings Azazel gave to humanity carved pathways that no divine decree could erase. Even after the Watchers were bound and the Nephilim swept away by flood and judgment, humanity still carried the seeds Azazel planted. Ironwork did not vanish, cosmetics did not fade, herbal sorcery did not return to silence. These arts continued, not because humans remembered the angel who first handed them these secrets, but because the secrets themselves had already woven into human survival. And so Azazel lived on not through presence, but through influence. Across cultures, across ages, his shadow reappeared under new names. In Mesopotamia, he was the desert demon that wandered the wastes, a reminder of untamed knowledge. In early Israelite lore, he became the force associated with the wilderness, the remote, the abandoned, the spiritually volatile. In mystical traditions, he resurfaced as the keeper of forbidden arts, the patron of those who sought power outside divine law. But this wasn't only about myth. it was energetic. The knowledge he awakened created a shift in human consciousness that never reversed. Humanity now knew what it meant to alter the world and to alter themselves. They learned to shape metal, appearance, nature, and fate. And once a species tastes agency, it never returns to innocence. The shadow of Azazel whispered through time in subtler ways too. Burit in the birth of ancient metallurgy, Burit in early makeup rituals that blended beauty with spellcraft, Burit in tribes that used blades not only for war but for ceremony, Burit in hidden schools that preserved herbal lore long after the flood washed away empires. Everywhere humans innovated, adapted, or sharpened their identity, you could trace a faint echo back to that ancient descent, to the angel who taught them to transform their world instead of simply live in it. In some eras, he was feared. In others, he was revered, but never forgotten. Even sealed in the depths of Dudale, Azazel became a symbol, a reminder that enlightenment always comes with a cost, that evolution often grows from disobedience, and that every gift has a shadow cast behind it. His fall might have been final, but his influence became eternal.
Long before theologians turned his name into a warning, and long before demonologists chained him to the idea of evil, Azazel existed as something far more complex, an archetype woven into the spiritual architecture of humanity. Because when you strip away the mythic drama, the angelic politics, the punishments and prophecies, what remains is the essence of what Azazel truly symbolizes, the force that pushes humanity out of innocence and into self-awareness. Azazel is not just a character in an ancient book. He is the mythic embodiment of the moment a species realizes it can shape its own destiny, and that realization is always a double-edged blade. He is the shadow side of enlightenment. Where Prometheus brought fire, Azazel brought transformation. Prometheus stole light, Azazel revealed technique. One taught humans how to survive, the other taught them how to ascend and how to fall. He represents the cosmic tension between obedience and evolution, between divine timing and personal ambition, between sacred order and the hunger to know more than we should. To mystics, Azazel is the archetype of the rebel teacher, the mentor who does not guide with gentle lessons, but with dangerous truths, the kind of truth that forces you to grow or to break, to confront your shadow or be consumed by it. And there's something deeply human about that. Everyone at some point meets an Azazel in their life, a force, a person, a moment that shatters old innocence and introduces a knowledge you can't unlearn. Jung would call this the shadow mentor, the figure who pulls you deeper into the unknown, not to destroy you, but to reveal the parts of yourself you've refused to acknowledge. Azazel's teachings weren't evil, they were accelerating. He brought humanity face to face with its own potential, too quickly, too intensely, too early. And in spiritual evolution, timing is everything. Because when power arrives before wisdom, the imbalance creates chaos. But that chaos also reveals truth. It exposes desire, ambition, identity, and the fractures hidden in the human soul. Azazel, in essence, represents humanity's first awakening, the moment we stepped out of divine childhood and into the dangerous freedom of adulthood. Not ready, not prepared, but hungry. This is why he remains one of the most feared and misunderstood figures in angelology. He is not the destroyer of humanity. He is the mirror that shows us what we become when we hold power without direction.
History paints Azazel in stark colors. Rebellion on one side, corruption on the other. But ancient stories are rarely that simple. And when you study the roots of his myth, a deeper, more unsettling possibility emerges. What if Azazel wasn't evil, but simply ahead of his time? From heaven's perspective, his actions were undeniably a breach, a violation of cosmic timing, of sacred boundaries, of the delicate pacing needed for humanity's spiritual evolution. Angels operate under order, sequence, divine structure. They don't disrupt, they uphold. But Azazel looked at humanity and saw something heaven didn't seem ready to acknowledge yet. Potential that needed ignition. He saw a species struggling with the basics of survival. He saw creativity locked behind physical limitation. He saw souls capable of immense growth, but crawling toward it at a painfully slow pace. So he took a risk. He gave humans tools that could elevate them, tools that could empower them, defend them, beautify them, awaken them, tools that could reshape their environment rather than merely endure it. Was that arrogance? Possibly. But was it malevolent? That's harder to prove. His teachings did create chaos. That's undeniable. War, ambition, vanity, sorcery. These erupted like storms across the ancient world. But chaos isn't always the mark of evil. It's often the birth pangs of transformation. Humanity didn't fall because Azazel corrupted them. Humanity fell because power without spiritual maturity always fractures. So the real question becomes, did Azazel corrupt humanity, or did he expose what was already dormant inside them? He didn't implant violence, he revealed it. He didn't create vanity, he stirred it awake. He didn't invent ambition, he sharpened it. Everything humans unleashed afterward was already part of their inner landscape. Azazel simply accelerated the timeline. And maybe that's why he became such a controversial figure. Not because he opposed heaven, but because he forced humanity to confront their shadow before they were ready. In some wisdom traditions, this is the role of the initiator, the one who pushes the hero out of the comfort zone and into the fire of becoming. In others, he is the adversary, not out of hatred, but because challenge is the crucible of growth. Perhaps Azazel is both, a rebel and a teacher, a breaker of rules and a bringer of truth, a catalyst whose gifts came with a cost. He may not have been right in method, but he wasn't entirely wrong in vision. And in the deepest layers of myth, this is why his name endures. Because he represents the eternal question of human evolution. Are we ready for the knowledge we seek? Or do we demand enlightenment, faster than our spirits can carry it.
Azazel's story doesn't end in the pit of Dudael. It doesn't end with judgment or with the binding or even with the flood. Because what he set in motion was never about a single angel. It was about humanity itself. And humanity, once awakened, does not go back to sleep. Even sealed away, Azazel's influence rippled across time like a vibration in the fabric of consciousness. His legacy didn't travel through angels or tablets. It lived through human hands, human minds, human choices. Every time a metal blade was forged, every time pigments touched the skin, every time herbs were used to heal or harm, every time someone chose self-expression over conformity, Azazel's spark flickered again. Not as corruption, but as possibility. Because the truth is this: Azazel didn't simply teach humans to rebel against heaven. He taught them to rebel against limitation, against stagnation, against the smallness they were told to accept. He is the archetype of the forbidden teacher, the one who accelerates your growth, even when it hurts, even when it breaks something inside you, even when it forces you to confront the shadows you've avoided. And humanity has been wrestling with that gift ever since. In one era, he becomes a demon. In another, a misunderstood angel. In another, a symbol of rebellion, creativity, innovation, and the dangerous beauty of free will. But underneath every version, one truth remains. Azazel is the echo of humanity's first evolution. The moment we realized we were not passive beings in a divine story, but conscious co-creators of our own destiny. His fall mirrors our rise. His punishment mirrors our struggle. His exile mirrors the distance we sometimes feel between the world we inherited and the world we are trying to build. And in that way, Azazel becomes less of a villain and more of a mirror, reflecting both the brilliance and the darkness inside the human soul. Because the real story of Azazel isn't about an angel who taught humans to rebel. It's about a species learning that rebellion is part of awakening, that knowledge has a price, that evolution demands discomfort, and that every leap forward begins with one dangerous, unforgettable question. What else am I capable of? With Azazel, humanity took its first step toward answering it, and we've been walking that path ever since.